Right, we'll just invite our next speaker, who is Mike McCarthy, who is one of our trustees' patients from Oxford, who's going to tell us about his experience of having a leg ulcer. Thank you.
Right, good afternoon. As said, I'm Mike McCarthy. I'm from Oxford, where the excellent Sarah Gardner has taken me in hand in recent years, but I've actually had leg ulceration continuously for over 15 years. Yeah. My lifestyle probably contributed a fair bit to getting ulceration in the first place. So I'll just briefly say that most of my work in life has been management consultancy in one form or another, mainly looking at the idea of service management where we don't have a technological high priesthood, for example, in the IT department. We have people who have customers and need to be able to provide them with a service that makes their life easier. So I feel that niche between any service provider and any customer grouping and try to make them understand each other's issues and needs and come up with some sort of synergy to achieve what they want. Now, to do this, I've had to travel about working in the head offices of my company groups because you need to work with senior management to make any difference on this sort of thing. So I spent 20 years doing a weekly commute to wherever. Could be Leeds, could be Liverpool, could be Geneva. And I'd pack up at the beginning of a week, spend a week staying in a hotel, and during that week, I'd be sat in meetings, I'd be sat in interviews, I'd be preparing reports, and I'd be having quiet one-on-one sessions in the evenings with people who were looking for a better way to do their job. Classic sedentary lifestyle. So I enjoyed the people aspects of it, but while I was doing that, I was spending a lot of time away from home, a lot of time eating hotel food. At the stage at which my health started breaking down, I weighed 160 kilos. Now, when my legs started breaking down, I was getting wounds that couldn't be explained. They got worse. I did, as the previous speaker mentioned, tried to treat it myself, mainly because I was away from home, could do no other. So it was over-the-counter dressings, ointments, etc. And eventually that got to the point where it was so conspicuously sort of not working that I came back early from a trip to Switzerland to see my GP. He did the same as me, but with more knowledge, decided to treat the symptoms, but that meant dressings, and dressings are what nurses are for. So he withdrew. So I spent several years then being treated by practice nurses and district nurses before they realised they were getting nowhere, and fortunately had a wound management clinic in Oxford they could refer me to. They brought out their best weapons, up to and including punch grafts. They got nowhere and referred me to the local vascular people to see if they could actually find some underlying causes that would explain why nobody was successful in their healing. And they found that there were indeed underlying causes and that they weren't going to go away. In all that travel, probably in the weekly trips to Switzerland, I had one or more deep vein thromboses, and they'd actually left debris in the minor vessels in the foot that wouldn't cure. So we tried several arterial replacements. Every time I got a new artery in, it was the effect of delivering a motorway straight down into a village lane. And every new artery gave 3 months benefit and then silted up again. So we reached the position where 5 years into my treatment, there was only one straight binary decision left as far as my consultant was concerned. I could either have my leg off, or I could accept the fact that I would have a long-term chronic condition and live with chronic management of that. I chose the latter. I'm rather attached to my leg, even if it's suboptimal in its condition. And I started, well, for a start, I had to give up the travel. The NHS works weekdays. I was only home at weekends. So there's no way I could continue my previous job. I had to accept part-time assignments instead of full-time 3 months to 2 years assignments so that I could actually be at home during the week and actually see healthcare professionals. Sort of worked for a while. The practice nurses were absolute darlings, but they were the old school, cared, were very warm, but a previous generation. And when I came in with concerns and factual questions about why the condition of my wounds had changed, the sort of answer I get will be, "Don't worry about that, dear. With some of my old ladies, you can see the bone in there." It was not helpful and not what I was looking for. So I went to ground. For 6 or 7 years, I treated my legs myself. I phoned the surgery whenever I needed more dressings. The only time I actually went in to see them is on the rare occasions when I fell down on the job and I got an infection that needed treatment beyond my capabilities. Comments about the surgery, they let me get away with that for 7 years. Eventually, the GP that was nominally responsible for my care, who I'd never actually met, went to a lecture by Sarah Gardner's tissue viability team in Oxford. I was so impressed, she thought of me and the cost of all the dressings that I was ordering on her behalf and encouraged me to go and see Sarah. So we had a discussion. Sarah immediately had an off-the-shelf sort of care model that would suit my condition very well indeed. But it would require me to become a professional patient. I'd have to be in Oxford to receive treatment 3 times a week. That effectively meant my life was over as anything other than a professional patient. So we had a few words about that, and Sarah sat down, listened, asked some questions deliberately designed to encourage me to rethink what my objectives were. My rubric for sort of care of my leg was simply avoid infections that need external attention. Now, she helped me realize for myself that that is a very gloomy view of life. And we tried to look at a plan that would let us work towards getting better care, reducing my sort of health issues, and allowing me to enjoy what I wanted to do more, which was getting on with life. So we did that, and we achieved spectacular results. Over the course of about 6 months to a year, the ulceration on my left leg, which was the easier case, it was only about 90 square centimetres ulceration, healed completely. The right leg, which will never heal because of the debris down in the foot, went down from about 300 square centimetres ulceration to about a third of that. We were very confident that we were getting on top of that. The cost of my care was dropping dramatically. The quality of my life was improving just as dramatically, and then it all went backwards. We eventually found out that something called deep vein reflux, that will mean something to you people, has set in, and the blood circulation again was compromised, and I was ending up with a situation sort of where the left leg had broken down again, and the ulceration on both legs was as bad as it ever had been. So back to the surgeons, but in the interval, sort of while I got my head down, not only was there a new generation on the ground in the community with the likes of Sarah and her equivalent teams across the country, but the surgical people had learnt things as well. And my surgeon did something absolutely dramatic. She gave me a non-surgical intervention, something called ionoprost infusion, if any of you are interested. I was in hospital for a week, having 7-hour infusions every day, and they dilated the blood vessels to such an extent that improvements in my condition were visible before I even left hospital. Over the next 6 months, that increased and continued, and at the end of that period, which is the effective life span of the infusion technique, we ended up transferring me onto twice daily sildenafil, which has the same effect of dilating blood vessels. Now, the effect of that over the last 2 years has been that my left leg, again, has healed. This time, I'm confident it will stay healed, and the damage on my right leg is now down to a quarter of what it had been. Now, that is the medical side of it. That's the condition. The effect on my life over this period, as I said, I was going around the country, I was talking to directors, to CEOs about what they were doing and trying to help them deal with problems that they confessed they couldn't deal with themselves, which is why I was there. So I'd find myself preparing a report and a presentation. This is an actual example where I was going to go and tell a CEO that his directors had wasted a year and several £1 million on a project because every time one of their staff told them something that they thought was career-threatening bad news, they were bullied into withdrawing it. All the facts were there, the case was incontrovertible, I had the recommendations to prove it and to recommend how to sort of get out of it. The morning that I was due to present that, I woke up to find my wounds had leaked and the bed was full of blood. Now, rather than have housekeeping sort of throw a panic and call the police or faint and sue for psychological damage or whatever, I was up at 5 a.m. scrubbing blood out of sheets. Now, instead of being calm and prepared for a presentation that was giving bad news, I can assure you I was not in a good frame of mind when I went into the office that day. So that continued for 5 years. Condition not improving. I was carrying, every time I went away to start a new working week, as much weight in medical dressings as I was in clothing. Life got pretty miserable. But we got through that. We got to the point where it was clear that surgical intervention was going to get nowhere. Sarah took me in hand, and we've now got to the point where, as I say, my condition is improving. And because of that, not only do I have less to worry about in terms of dressings, I can exercise more. I've lost a total of 40 kilos over the past 10 years, and 10 of those kilos have been in the last 18 months, simply because, with Sarah's help, I can move about. Now, the crucial point of all this is not just that where treatment works, it affects everything, but the fact that it was a multidisciplinary approach that achieved the changes. I'm convinced that what we've achieved in my case, and it's not unique, I'm convinced, is a virtuous circle whereby Professor Hans, my surgeon, was delivering healing capability into my legs, and Sarah's wound management was maintaining the wound bed in such a case that it was amenable to healing. And that actually worked. The healing capability was there, the oxygen-rich blood was getting down there, the wound bed was clean, as healthy as it can be in that condition, so that was healing. The only contribution I had to make was to avoid doing anything stupid. So that is the model I would seek to encourage you to go forward with. I know that it's something that you're keen on anyway, but a multidisciplinary approach really does work. And the difference it can make is measurable and provable, both in terms of the difference it makes to an individual patient and the difference it makes to the cost of treatment. And the third benefit, which these days with the NHS is not to be dismissed, is actually achieving something like that, winning on something like that, is a real positive mood changer for the health practitioners themselves. So that's my story.
Thank you very much, Mike. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think as clinicians, we really appreciate you sharing your experiences with us. Are there any questions for Mike from the floor? And if you can wait till you get the microphone, because I do believe the questions are being recorded.
Thank you very much. That was very illuminating. But I wonder now, in retrospect, what could we as clinicians said to you 15 years ago that might have helped you change your approach to your leg? And you obviously were coping with work and everything, and someone had to persuade you to change.
I'm glad you asked that question. You got the timescale entirely wrong. 15 years is the length of time I was a patient. And patient, I learnt over that time, is not someone who's willing to wait around for things. It comes from the Latin verb pati, which means to suffer. And suffer I did in spades. The difference that could have been made is before I was a patient. if the health professionals dealing with me at that time, just on the odd visit, were actually in a position to say, look, the health style you're living, the state that you're in now in terms of physical health means that you are now 10-fold, 20-fold more likely to develop this or that condition. And by the way, that's what this or that condition can do to your life. I might have listened. So my encouragement is to get there before you even have a patient. Once you do have a patient, get in and gather facts as early as you can. If we'd actually taken all those scans 5 years earlier to show that we actually had detritus in the foot, that the blood flow was never going to improve, we'd have saved 3 arterial transplants, 4 skin grafts onto my legs, and an awful lot of time, money, and pain. So get your multidisciplinary team together, get the facts as far as you can early on, rather than just doing something and seeing what happens. Does that make sense?
I think yes, it's very useful, but it's interesting if we look at, say, smoking. It's now 50 years since Dole showed very clearly that smoking killed doctors quickly and they changed their habits, but we still have people smoking. And so that advice has been going on. And so it's quite interesting how do we get the right advice and then a receptive audience to pick up?
Yeah, I accept that. And the only thing I can do to encourage you to take this path is that where you're identifying one individual as being out of step with his community, with the average, as saying you personally are at this level of increased risk, you personally are in danger of doing something that the people around you are not, that must strike home more forcefully, I believe. Yeah?
Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to have to stop there. Thank you.